I very often hear the phrase, I want to learn to sew so I can create and design my own clothes and patterns. It's a very common goal because I had that myself when I first started sewing. But what does that journey actually look like from, learning how to thread a machine to I can sew anything that I imagine? Let's go through the 5 stages that I think we all go through in our sewing journeys from A to B and what it looks like in the middle. It's kind of like having a crystal ball and seeing the sewing journey, the path ahead of you, right? Sewing friends, welcome. This is quite a special video and I'm very excited to chat about this topic today. If we're actually just meeting for the first time, welcome. My name's Evelyn Wood and I'm the creator of VintageSewingSchool.com, and there I have helped thousands of people in their sewing journeys, and so I've seen thousands of sewing journeys and what that looks like for us all, and of course including my own sewing journey. I've been able to boil it down, I think, to sort of 5 different stages that we go through in our learning, because the kind of, skills build on each other as we go through, and it's kind of nice to have that vision ahead of you, right? To know where you're going when you have that idea that you want to be able to sew and create anything you want. I know that's probably your goal because I know that was for me. That's why I started sewing. I wanted them to fit and be creative in the design, the style. That was me. And so no matter what stage you're at, I think you'll find yourself in one of these, and I'd love to hear it. So keep notes and leave me comments at the end. Let's go through these 5 different stages of learning to sew from complete beginner. And so that is stage 1, learning to use your sewing machine. Of course, this is the first stage that we go through in just figuring out this weird and wonderful sewing machine that we all love so much. Threading it, using the bobbins, how to troubleshoot all those problems that arise when using it. Of course, just getting used to your machine. Now, you never stop learning, of course, because you keep building on those skills, but you go through this stage pretty quickly. And stage 2 is where you sort of make up a few first basic simple projects and you're really getting used to sewing things together. So I always recommend a simple bag project like my 1920s inspired bag. Something that is non-garment is really good to get started with because that's for later, we'll get there. And just to get used to cutting out fabric, to putting pieces of fabrics together, to figuring out right sides and sewing things together so you don't forget back stitching. And so you're used to getting sewing curves and clipping things and just getting used to sewing stuff together is this stage where you're just a few simple projects. But then, of course, you're learning to sew because you want to sew clothes, right? I know, me too. And then this is where I think we hit stage 3, when we do get to this stage pretty quickly. And stage 3 is really, well, you're learning how to use patterns. So when you pick up the sewing pattern, how to use it, what all the symbols are, how to read the back, what the sizing means, what all the seam allowances are, all the things about using patterns. And then, of course, all what I call Sewing 101. Which is basically all the assumed knowledge of sewing that the pattern envelope and the sewing tutorials don't really tell you about because it's just the assumed knowledge, but we have to learn it somewhere. And this is where I think in this stage, it's a combination of learning to use patterns and all the Sewing 101s, learning about fabrics and grain lines and all these types of things, different sewing terms that come up, interfacings, ironing, seam finishes, all the things that aren't even necessarily on your pattern because you also have to learn the pattern, as we said. This is a fun stage and a lot of people mostly get to here, but I find that this is the point where a lot of people tend to start dropping off after this stage, because this is where we get to stage 4, where I class this as when you're starting to go, well, first of all, you're sewing clothes, and stage 4 is when you realize that in order to sew clothes, you actually also need to learn the skill of pattern adjusting, and so to make clothes fit. So you're learning how to actually adjust patterns for fit and understanding this whole fitting world, how to pin, tuck, how to make pattern adjustments to your actual pattern. And of course, then starting to, at the same time, use more advanced sewing techniques and even starting to go what I call off pattern, where, maybe your pattern is giving you instructions for a lapped zip, but you're thinking, I've already done a lap zip before and I have a different method that I've used, which I kind of like. I'm just going to use my method of a lap zip instead. Or maybe you choose a different hem finish rather than what the pattern instruction tells you to do. So you're starting to go off pattern and just starting to realize you can make your own choices in the construction and learning this whole world of fit and pattern adjusting. And as I said, this is the point I find a lot of people hit a wall and, well, they get stuck at and give up sewing because it all seems a bit too hard sometimes. And they get burnt out, and I really don't want that for you. This is why I actually created Vintage Sewing School, my online school, is because I saw a gap. It's not about vintage clothes or vintage style, it's about vintage sewing skills. Let me explain. You know when you might have your grandmother or maybe your mother could just sew anything that they thought of? That's what I mean. It's the skills in being able to create anything, not just pick up a pattern and sew from a pattern. And I started Vintage Sewing School because I saw this gap, and I know that so many, you probably may be one of them included, that really want that goal, that vision for yourself too, to create basically anything that you can think of in your mind and have it fit you really well. Quality clothes, and to go off pattern, not be beholden to the sewing pattern. And that's the way I've structured Vintage Sewing School. If all this is really piquing your interest and you feel like you need a guide, a helping hand, that is my whole job. That is what I do. I would love to have you in class at Vintage Sewing School, and I'm going to leave you some links down below to join us there, because I know it can really help you when you've got someone to help you through this whole process. That is what I do. So links down below for Vintage Sewing School on that one. Because the ultimate goal is to get to stage 5. And this is, well, the level of mastery. This is where you will spend the whole rest of your sewing journey, is just mastering all of this. This is where you really start designing the clothes that you think of. So mushing, 1, 2, 3 different patterns together, the bodice of this, the skirt of another, change the sleeves, and kind of really mushing those patterns together, create the design and style that you want. You really choosing fabrics and trims that really set the design out to be what you're imagining, what you want to create in your mind. Not to mention, you are no longer generally even following the sewing instructions so much, because you're just using that pattern as simply a tool, because you'll make your own version of that pattern and you'll choose your own sewing techniques. You know how to do lap zips, what seam finishes you want to do, and what order of construction you want to use for the finishes that you choose for that garment, and you can put it together yourself. Now, as I said, and of course, fitting is a continual journey that we never end. So you keep getting better and better at those pattern adjusting skills as well. And this whole stage 5 is just this level of mastery, and we just keep getting better and better and better. Every single garment you make, every single time, you just keep building on those skills. And as I said, it never ends. We're always still in this stage of mastery through our sewing journeys, and it is half of the fun, I think, to see those improvements as we go along, don't you think? I would absolutely love to hear, what stage do you think that you're in? I want to hear. And also, is there something that you think that is holding you back from going to the next stage, or what do you have to learn to maybe progress to the next stage? I'd love to hear that too, because it always gives me great video ideas and topics to talk about, because that's what we do here. We are a sewing community, and it's my job here to lay the path forward, hopefully, in the sewing path, to help you see that vision ahead so you can get there, whether you are just learning to thread your machine, whether you're just learning to read patterns and understand, or you're just starting the fitting journey. The ultimate goal, I know for most of us, might be you, is to get to that stage where you can just sew those quality clothes that you dream of, that anything in your mind that you can create without having to use the pattern as a guide, right? I know. There's links down below in the description box, and well, until next time, my sewing friends, happy sewing. Bye.